wouldn't expect anything less. You know, whenever y'all first came, I really thought you was the one I was going to have to watch. But it's really her. It's really her. Yeah, she may have been elbowing you saying, shh, don't do that. But, yeah. You have your Bibles with you. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 27. Proverbs chapter 27. We'll begin in verse number 1. Proverbs 27, verse number 1 says, "Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth." You know, sometimes it's human nature, really, to be overly confident in what future days hold. And I say that, you say, well, I don't know about that. We all make plans, do we not? We all have plans and think at times about what we're going to do tomorrow or the next day or even the day after that or even a week or a month out in advance. And, you know, he says here, don't boast about tomorrow. You know, it's easy, you know, especially... you know, we're always progressing. We're always moving forward. And he says the reason that we're not to boast about tomorrow is because why? Because we don't know what tomorrow holds. It may not come, and if it does come, you don't know what's going to happen that's going to alter your plans that you have or whatever it is you have going on. And so really, you know, just as James chapter 14, verses 13 through 16 tells us that we should have a humble attitude towards the future. And I know sometimes I think that, you know, we look at that second part of this and he says, "For thou knowest not what a day may bring forth." I'm kind of in line with Spurgeon. Spurgeon considered it a blessing that we don't know what tomorrow holds. I know sometimes we probably have all been guilty of saying, "I just wish I knew what tomorrow held." The reality is that may not be the case. And you know, if we knew, then that's one more day we're going to worry about what tomorrow holds. Right? That's one more. If it's bad, we're going to be worried about it. If it's good, we'll move past today. We won't take care of today. You know, I think that's what's vitally important in life, is that the only thing we have any involvement in is right now, today. Not yesterday. We already had our involvement there. We can't change it. And we're not to tomorrow yet, so we can't have any involvement there yet. We can make plans, but obviously those plans are likely to change. So Solomon says, listen, don't boast yourself about tomorrow. Don't be so overly confident about what tomorrow is going to bring and what you're going to do tomorrow because you don't know really what it's going to bring. Verse number 2, he says, "Let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips." We should stay away from self-promotion really in its many forms. You know, modern technology allows us to be able to have multiple opportunities and methods to praise ourselves, but we should be careful and avoid such praise. And you know, he talks about a stranger. He says, "Let not," you know, after he says, "Don't praise yourself," he says, "Let another man praise thee, a stranger, not thine own lips." This is, you know, it oftentimes means more if somebody else is singing your praises than if you're the one singing your praises. And I think that's what Solomon is alluding to here, that, honor, it's more honorable. Even a stranger than being the product of self-praise and self-promotion. Verse number 3, he says, a stone is heavy and the sand weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than them both. Obviously here Solomon is appealing to some self-evident truths, right? Don't take a rocket scientist to figure out that stones can be heavy and the nature of sand to be weighty. And so he's alluding to those. But then he says a fool's wrath is heavier than both of them. This is somebody who, don't forget, is rejecting God's wisdom. They express their anger and wrath. It's a dangerous thing. The wrath of any person can have great consequences, but likely the wrath of a fool is going to have much more. Verse number 4, wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? So in all of its manifestation, when you talk about anger, it's dangerous and it's a difficult to control expression. When we the metaphor here depicts anger as a spiritual force that's destructive, it's irrational, it's violent. And so he then moves on, he says, who's able to stand before jealousy? There is a power, we obviously are aware of the dangers of anger, right? I mean, we've all probably been angry, but oftentimes we don't realize the danger that comes in relation to jealousy. There's some issues there. The power and destructive capability that jealousy has can go beyond that of wrath and anger. It can make a bigger torrent of evil. It was envy that motivated religious leaders to want Jesus himself to be crucified. It was their jealousy of him. Why? Because he had such a big following, and they didn't like that, and it bothered them, and so they were jealous. And jealousy in itself is a raging emotion that defies reason at times. That's jealousy. When somebody is consumed with jealousy, they oftentimes do things they would not do if they were not consumed with jealousy. And so it's important to know the seriousness and the dangers that come with that. Verse number 5. Open rebuke is better than secret love. Open rebuke. I don't know about you, but open rebuke hurts, doesn't it? If you ever been openly rebuked, it's not pleasant. And oftentimes we're hesitant, I think, to rebuke others. And I think we, obviously using the word rebuke as it is here, none of us really like that word. We could soften the blow a little bit with correcting others. And even among our brothers and sisters in Christ, it's something that's difficult to do. I'll tell you that there are times where you have to have hard conversations with people, and those hard conversations, no matter how you handle it, those hard conversations can go one or two ways depending on how the person receives it, right? And so I think sometimes that shies us away from putting ourselves in position to do those things. But we have to understand that there is certainly a time and a place where rebuke is not only good, but it's better than the alternative, right? There's certainly a need for it, and sometimes the need is greater than and better than the alternative. And he says it's better than secret love, or love that is carefully concealed. What good does a concealed love do? It doesn't really do any good, does it? I mean, if it's not known, it may, I guess, maybe a little, but and so what Solomon is getting at here is the open rebuke is really honest love, if we want to be real about it, right? Because if we're not willing to, and I'm not talking about just confronting somebody because they upset you, because they, went somewhere with somebody else or did something with somebody. I'm talking about somebody that is not doing something they're supposed, they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, right? And you, in love, correct them openly. That is more love than it is secret, and is more beneficial than a concealed or a secret love. And so that honest love is much better. It's more beneficial to both you and the other person than it is to have a concealed love, is what Solomon's saying there. Verse number 6, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Again, the mark of a true friend is that they will be willing to wound us with loving correction. They may tell us things that hurt. They may tell us things that pierce deep, and they're correcting. It may not feel good, as genuine wounds don't, but it is an expression of the love and faithfulness of a friend. And on the flip side of that, he says the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. This cautions us that not all kisses are the greetings of friends. Not all kindness. Everything that somebody does to that's good or kind is not always. It's not always coming from a friend. You have to be careful. You have to be mindful of those things. And so, they may come from an enemy and they may be deceitful. Verse number 7, the full soul loatheth and honeycomb. I'm telling y'all, Solomon likes him some honey. But to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. So a satisfied soul loathes a honeycomb. When life and when our lives, when we're satisfied, either material or physically, it's easier to reject or things that would otherwise be greatly desired. Why? Because we're satisfied. And if we're not satisfied, it might be more apt to get those things. He uses honeycomb as the idea here that. Hey, you might would in other circumstances want that, but because you're, he says that your soul is satisfied, you don't really want it, so you reject it at this time. But he says, to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. And so, on the flip side of that, when a life is truly hungry, they'll eat anything. When you're hungry, things that you would not normally eat might taste better than they would if you were full. If you've ever overindulged. We just passed Thanksgiving, right? Nobody did any overindulging. Nah, not at all. We'll have altar call tonight after that one. I overindulged. But you eat, and you're full. But there's something on that dessert table that looks really, really good. And you know it's good. And you eat it, and it just wasn't quite as good as you thought it was going to be. However, wait till tomorrow, and you're real hungry and you hadn't had anything else, and that same pie is sitting on the table, and you go get a piece of it, and you're like, wow, that's really, really, really good. It wasn't as good because you were full, you were satisfied. And, at the same time, if you're really hungry and you go and eat something that maybe you don't really care for, but maybe it's all you got in the house, it's the best thing you ever ate when you're hungry. And so... and he says that they'll eat almost anything, consider it sweet. That's true not just in a we're talking about food and things like that, but in the physical world, it's true in the spiritual world. It's true when those who are awakened as truly hungry souls are ravenous for spiritual food. They'll eat whatever. They'll take whatever they can get. Verse number 8. As a bird that wandereth from her nest, so is a man that wandereth from his place. Here in just very few words, Solomon paints a heart-touching picture of a bird away from its place. A bird, its nest is a place of sanctuary. It's a place of safety. It's a place of security. The nest is where the bird belongs. And so he paints a picture here of a bird wandering from her nest. And he says, in the second part of that, he says that so is a man that wandereth from his place. That place is the place that is appointed to you and I by God. Every one of us have a place. And we're to be in that place. And that place is the safest, most secure place that we can ever be. But when we wander away from it, we're vulnerable. We've left that place of security where we no longer are able to contribute as we should, and we need to take care that we perceive our place, not only one that culture or community may assign to us, but the place specifically that God has assigned to us. Verse number 9. Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart. So doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. Solomon states here that a self-evident truth, it's in the nature of an ointment or perfume to delight the heart, and it does that through the pleasant smell that it provides. But he then says the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Hearty counsel from a friend can bring delight. Just as it's natural for that ointment or perfume to do so, this proverb, when we read this, should make us ask is, not necessarily, I think sometimes when we read something like that, we think, well, who's giving hearty counsel to me? Right? Nobody's giving hearty counsel to me. No, maybe instead of asking who's giving hearty counsel to me, maybe we should be asking if there's anybody we can give hearty counsel to. Maybe is there anybody that I can, give that type of counsel to and help somebody and bring delight to their heart. And I think we have to be mindful of that. Verse number 10. Thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not, neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity, for better is a neighbor that is near than a brother far off. The bonds of friendship are dear and obligating, even beyond generations. Friends should not be forsaken, and so that's when he says, "Don't forsake your own friend or your father's friend." But then he says, "Nor go into your brother's house in the day of calamity." We should assume that in this he's talking about a biological, a birth brother or sister. We obviously assume that those are sometimes the best people to help us in the day of calamity, especially the brother, if the brother's far away. But he says better is a lesser resource that's nearby. than a resource that's far away. And we again, and I think that if you've ever lived far away from a family, then you understand this, I think, a little bit more maybe than those that have never experienced that. But sometimes it's not the ones that we would normally call on and ask for help. And I think is what Solomon's getting at there whenever he says, "For better is a neighbor that's near than a brother afar off." A brother that's far off ain't going to be able to help you very well, is he? That neighbor that's near is going to be more beneficial to you, and so you got to rely on them sometimes more so than you would your flesh and blood. Verse 11, "My son, be wise and make my heart glad, that I may answer him that reproaches me." Again, simple encouragement to his son to be wise. And therefore, that when the son's wise, it's going to bring gladness to his father. But he says that I may answer him who reproaches me. A foolish son is the cause. If you remember, as we've studied throughout the book of Proverbs, a foolish son is the one that causes reproach to his or her parents. And in some way, the son who rejects wisdom makes the parent look bad. And so he says that I may answer him who reproaches me. Verse 12, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." Wisdom leads us to anticipate danger, anticipate when problems are on the horizon. And when we get that when we're able to anticipate that by wisdom that God has given us, we're able to take action. We're able to be prepared. We're able to prepare ourselves and avoid whatever that evil is or whatever that is that's coming our way. But he says the simple pass on and are punished. The simple is those who are naive, those who are untrained in wisdom. They're blind to the potential dangers around them. They'll eventually bear the bad consequences of their blindness and be punished. It's almost like they feel like when we see it that they just go through life haphazardly. They don't seem to be bothered by anything, when in reality that's not a good thing, right? They go through it almost ignorantly, if you will, because ignorance is the opposite of wisdom, and so they're going to be suffered. They're going to be punished for that and have to suffer the consequences. Whereas you and I, if we adhere to wisdom and we allow that wisdom to guide us and direct us, and we accept it, then we can avoid that they will endure. Verse 13, "Take his garment that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge of him for a strange woman." If someone, Solomon's saying if someone is a bad credit risk, foolish enough to be a surety for a stranger, then we should hold a security deposit against them, anything that they owe us. He says, take the garment. When he says that when he's surety for a seductress, this man is as immoral and foolish to be surety for a seductress, then we should especially regard him as a credit risk. Verse 14, "He that blesses his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning." Yeah, that sounds like a good friend, doesn't it? "A loud voice rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him." This is the sense that Solomon is getting at here is an over-the-top greeting and blessing meant to flatter or manipulate. It's loud and it starts early in the morning. Something is amiss in such excessive praise. There's some people that are just, they do those types of things, and it's not really genuine. It's not. There's something more to it than what meets the eye. But he says, blesses his friend with a loud voice. Again, that is extols a man above measure. The false prophets did this. Did Ahab, the people Herod. They praise him to his face, which when they make it loud and obnoxious. And if you've ever worked somewhere, you've probably seen this in your place of employment. There are people that will praise the boss whenever they're around. I mean, they will talk all kinds of good. I mean, just loud and obnoxious whenever they're not around. They got not nice things to say. Solomon here says that this will be counted a curse to him. Normally, a friendly greeting is a blessing, and yet if that blessing is flattery or meant to manipulate, it can be counted a curse. Verse 15 and 16 rather. A continual dropping in a very rainy day. Here we go. And a contentious woman are alike. Whosoever hideth her hideth the wind, and the ointment of his right hand, which bewrayeth itself. The continual dripping here, obviously, of rain. I think Solomon is trying to, I don't think he's trying to, I think he is painting a picture here. I think the scene is that of a house with a bad roof, where a rainy day means you're going to have a continual drip somewhere, right? Yeah, right in the bucket, in the trash can, or just on the floor, whichever. In the pot, and that dripping reminds you. What does that dripping remind you? Everything's good, right? No. That dripping is a reminder that there is a problem. It brings damage. It really, at the school we've had, in the past, we've had a ceiling leak right down the hall from me, and they put a trash can out there, and when it rains, and then you just hear it thump, thump, thump. That gets aggravating, doesn't it? Irritating, yes. Thank you, Miss Margie, for it gets irritating. And that's what Solomon is saying that a contentious woman in the house is like. He says it's like a rainy day, continual dripping. And what is that what you said, Margie? I'm just making sure that Margie said that, not me. He says that whosoever restrains her restrains the wind. To correct or reform a contentious woman can be a fool's errand. Anybody in here ever try to go contain the wind? Yeah. Don't, because you'll be wasting your time. It's hard to get a hold of, right? So is a contentious woman, and so I think whenever we look at this and he says, "Whoso hideth her hideth the wind, and the ointment of his right hand," or it's like oil in your hand, which bewrayeth itself. And listen, it's instead of trying to change a contentious woman, a wise and godly husband will love her as Jesus Christ loves the church. And I think the same is true on both sides, right? We can try, we can do all the work we want to, but what Solomon is saying, and Solomon's the wisest man to ever live, right? You can try to change that contentious man or woman. You can try to change them, even if it's not contentious. You can try to change. But in the reality is, if that's what you're going to do, you might as well go outside, slap some oil on your hands, and try to catch the wind. And you're going to probably get the same results. Right? Whose job is it to change them, if they're going to be changed? It's God's. And so the best thing you can do is love them and leave the changing up to God. Verse 17. Iron sharpens iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Iron, it's interesting that iron sharpens another piece of iron. However, how that happens is usually not a very pleasant, if we're looking, we're not talking about taking and putting it on a soapstone and trying to sharpen it that way. Solomon is painting the picture here of basically the way a blacksmith would create a sword or a knife or any sharp object. In that case, it takes a lot of striking. It takes a lot of friction. It causes a lot of sparks, and so a man can be used to sharpen or improve his friend, but sometimes it happens in hard ways. It's not always easy. I think, there's a lot of people that wear this verse and use this verse very proudly. And I think that there is a sense of good, obviously, that's found in this verse, but when we consider what that means, whenever you start thinking about the picture and the image of iron sharpening iron, there's some work that goes into that. It's not, again, it's not always a pretty process. The end results are good, right? But there's some friction, there's some sparks, there's some striking, there's some, it's how it happens. And Solomon's obviously using it that way because sometimes that's what we have to do with each other. Going back to, what Solomon talked about, that, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Hey, listen, I would rather my friend come to me and be truthful and honest, even if it hurts sometimes. I think that's iron sharpening iron is what Solomon is picturing there. And so some similar mindset there. Verse number 18, whoso keepeth the fig tree shall eat the fruit thereof. So he that waiteth on his master shall be honored. The worker is worthy of his reward, right? If a man keeps a fig tree, it's appropriate of him to eat the fruit of it. It's cruel and unfair to keep the fruit of a man's labor from him. And so he says, so is he who waits on his master will be honored. The appropriate fruit from properly serving one's master is to be honored. It's not right to keep honor from the one who's faithfully waited on his master. God promised to reward those who wait on him. And so we're just to do our work diligently, leave the promotion and reward up to God. I think sometimes we want man to reward us, and God said if that's who you want to reward you, then that'll be the reward you get, right? But we have to understand where the proper reward comes from for us in doing his work. Verse 19, as in water face answereth to face, so the heart of man to man. You ever been out on water whenever it's just smooth? It's like glass. I used to love when I was younger, my dad had a boat. We'd go out and we'd go tubing and skiing and kneeboarding, and I couldn't get up on skis, so I shouldn't say we skied because I couldn't. I could sit in a tube or lay on a tube all day long, or couldn't even get up on kneeboard either. So all I did was tube, I guess. But I loved whenever we'd go out there and that water would just be like glass. It was pretty. It was. And it gives a wonderful reflection. If you look over into that, it can give you a reflection just like a mirror, right? It shows your face. And he says, so man's heart reveals the man. Same way that, that water like a mirror, when you look into it, or even a mirror, when you look in it, what you see is what you get, right? ain't nothing you can do about it. I guess there is some things you can do about it, but it reveals what you really are. And the heart does the same thing there is what Solomon is saying. The heart reveals what the man really is. Verse number 20. Hell and destruction are never full. So the eyes of man are never satisfied. Hell and the grave, or the world beyond, will always receive humanity. It'll never be full. And here these are used as figures of something that can never be satisfied. It's not like there's going to get a point where, and I'll just use, here he says hell and destruction. Hell's not ever going to get to a point and say, we've reached maximum capacity, everybody else is going to heaven. It's not how that works. Hell will take as many people that choose to go there that will. It's never going to be satisfied. And so he says, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. Our longing to look upon things we desire will never be satisfied. It has to be controlled and brought under God's dominion. And so we have to understand and that's the lust of the flesh. Reality is what Solomon is referring to here, that we have to make sure we keep that in control and in check. Verse 21, as the fining pot for silver and the furnace for gold, so is a man to his praise. Appropriate place for silver and gold to be refined. It doesn't just happen anywhere, but in the refining pot. And so he says a man is valued by what others say of him. Again, alluding back to somewhat of what he's already said, that self-praise is not really good praise. You're better off letting somebody else bring you that praise and talk about you, especially a stranger. And again, we often know more of somebody's value. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of places of employment, and I don't know that all of them necessarily do it now, they're so desperate, but it's one of the important things of having references, right? People want reference because they want to be able to hear what somebody else has to say about you. You can come in and talk a good game, and I'll be honest, I believe there are people out there that are professional interviewers. They can walk into an interview and they can nail it. But when you start calling the references and you start hearing from other people, you start hearing different stories than what you heard in that interview, or what you saw on that application, or what you got on that phone call. And so, again, Solomon is saying that, we often know more of somebody's value by what others say of him than by what he thinks of himself. And obviously there are occasions where that may not be always accurate. I know that, you can't always believe everything everybody else says. I think that's why they use multiple references whenever they call. But again, letting somebody else sing your praises is much better for you than for you to walk around singing your own. Verse 22, though thou shouldest bray a fool in a mortar among wheat with a pestle, yet with not his foolishness depart from him. Will not his foolishness depart from him. Solomon uses here a striking and vivid image, like crushing grain with in a mortar with a pestle. This is he pictures a fool being ground up in this way, and despite the rough treatment mentioned there of that crushing him, the foolishness does not depart from the fool. He's as long as he continues to reject wisdom and truth, and he's going to remain a fool. And one of the sad marks of a fool is that most of the time they will not learn. They just will not learn. They will continue to be a fool because they're too prideful, they're too arrogant, they're too, they think they can figure it out and they don't need anybody else. Verse 23 through 27. Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. For riches are not forever, And doth the crown endure to every generation? The hay appeareth, and the tender grass showeth itself, and herbs of the mountains are gathered. The lambs are for thy clothing, and the goats are the price of the field. And thou shalt have goat's milk enough for thy food, for the food of thy household, and for the maintenance for thy maidens. Here Solomon wrote this with images from, again, the world of agriculture. Talks about flocks and herds and hay and grass and lambs and goats, but the overall principle applies to many areas of life. We should work hard. He says, be diligent to know the state of whatever it is that God has given you management over, right? If it's cattle, make sure that you know the state of those cattle. If it's our children, we're to know the state of our children. Whatever it is that God has given you management over, you should work hard, diligently to know the state of whatever it is. And if you don't know the condition of something, that's a problem. Is it not? It's a problem because you can't effectively manage it if you don't know the condition of it. And so he goes on, he says, for riches are not forever. We should give ourselves to diligent leadership and management because the future is uncertain. You don't ever know what tomorrow holds, do we? Sounds like we heard that somewhere, right? If we take good care of what God has given us now, it may provide for us in the future. For this time, the lambs could have provided clothing, they could have provided food, they could have provided whatever. But if they don't take care of what we have, it won't be able to provide us for anything in the future. And so I think that when we look at this, I don't necessarily know that any of this is specific. I think that it's all relative and generic, that really we should just manage what we've been given. Work diligently. Make sure you know the condition of it so that you can manage it effectively. Because you may need it. And if you don't take care of it, you may not have it when you need it, right? I think we could probably all relate best with that. I don't know anybody in here that, we may not all have goats, we may not all have hay, we may not all have any of those other things, but God, allows us to have money, right? And we've got to be good managers of it. We've got to be stewards of it. We've got to make sure that we use it wisely so that if we need it, we have it. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions tonight?